It's 2 a.m. You can't sleep, so you reach for your phone. Just a quick scroll, you tell yourself, but 20 minutes later, you're still there, swiping through lives that look more beautiful than yours, careers that shine brighter, relationships that seem effortless. Everyone's traveling, everyone's happy, everyone's figured it out. You close the app feeling worse than when you opened it. Here's what's strange. You know these images are curated. You know people only post their wins, their filtered faces, their best angles. You know this. And yet, the feeling remains. The comparison, the inadequacy, the quiet sense that somehow everyone else got the manual for living and you missed the distribution. 2,400 years ago, a philosopher named Plato told a story about prisoners chained in a cave watching shadows on a wall. They believed the shadows were reality, the whole of it. They had no idea they were seeing projections, distortions, echoes of something more real happening behind them. You might think, that's tragic, that's primitive, that could never be us. But what if the cave isn't a place anymore? What if it fits in your pocket? What if you carry it everywhere, check it 50 times a day, fall asleep with its glow on your face? What if you're not reading this story? What if you're living in it? Let's start with the original allegory. Plato asks us to imagine prisoners bound since childhood in an underground cave. They're chained so they can only look forward at a bare stone wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, people carry objects, statues, vessels, carved figures. The prisoners see only the shadows these objects cast on the wall. This is their entire world, the shadows, nothing else. They don't know about the fire, they don't know about the objects, they certainly don't know about the vast world outside the cave, the sky, the stars, the actual sun. For them, reality is shadows on stone. And because everyone in the cave agrees on what they're seeing, because there's consensus, they have no reason to doubt it. This isn't about stupidity. It's not even about lack of information. It's about being trapped in a diminished, distorted version of reality and having no reference point to know it. Ignorance, for Plato, isn't the absence of facts. It's the condition of mistaking shadows for substance. It's thinking you see clearly when you're actually looking at projections designed by someone else. Sound familiar? Every time you open your phone, you enter a cave. Not a physical one, something stranger. A cave customized just for you, showing you exactly the shadows it thinks you want to see, based on everything it knows about your clicks, your pauses, your late-night scrolling patterns. In Plato's story, one prisoner breaks free. The chains fall away. He turns around, and it's agony. The fire hurts his eyes. He's confused, disoriented. Everything he thought was real is revealed as shadow. The statues that cast them are more real, but even they are just representations. Someone forces him up and out of the cave. The journey is painful. Each step reveals his previous understanding is incomplete. And when he finally emerges into daylight, into the actual sun, the pain is almost unbearable. His eyes burn. He can barely see. He has to look at reflections in water before he can bear to see things directly. This is Plato's point. Liberation from ignorance isn't comfortable. It's not a smooth upgrade. Truth doesn't feel like enlightenment at first. It feels like violence. The real world, in all its unfiltered complexity, is harder to perceive than the simplified shadows. It requires adjustment. It demands you admit that everything you thought you understood was partial, distorted, controlled by others. And here's where the allegory gets dark. The freed prisoner, eventually adjusted to the light, sees reality as it is. He understands the sun as the source of everything. Truth, illumination, life itself. Naturally, he thinks of his fellow prisoners, still chained in darkness. He goes back to free them. They don't believe him. Worse, they think he's mad. His eyes, readjusted to darkness, can no longer see the shadows clearly. He stumbles. He seems confused. The prisoners conclude the journey out destroyed him. They decide that anyone who tries to free them should be killed. The one who saw truth becomes a threat, not a liberator, a threat. Now, translate this to your life right now. You carry a device that knows you intimately. It knows what you click, what you pause on, what makes you angry, what makes you hopeful, what you secretly want even if you've never said it aloud. Every interaction trains it to serve you better. Not truth, not growth, not challenge, just more of what keeps you engaged, more of what keeps you scrolling. These are your chains, not iron, not visible, but chains nonetheless. The algorithm doesn't force you to see certain things. It doesn't need to. It simply makes some shadows brighter, more frequent, more compelling. It shows you content that confirms what you already believe, that reinforces your existing worldview, that makes you feel right, justified, part of the enlightened few who get it. This is called a filter bubble, and it's not a bug, it's the design. Platforms have one goal: keep you watching. Not informed, not educated, not challenged, just watching. And what keeps humans watching? Content that triggers emotion, outrage, validation, fear, tribal belonging, the sensation of being right while others are dangerously wrong. So the algorithm builds you a cave where the shadows confirm your biases, where your tribe is always reasonable and the other tribe is always suspect, where complexity gets flattened into something simpler, angrier, more shareable. And you scroll, believing you're seeing reality, believing you're informed, believing you're free. But here's what makes the modern cave more insidious than Plato's. The shadows aren't just ideological, they're personal. Look at your social media feed. What do you see? Highlights, peak moments, curated joy. Everyone's relationship is #blessed. Everyone's vacation is pristine. Everyone's career is ascending. Even their struggles are photogenic. Aesthetic sadness, inspirational resilience, the kind of vulnerability that gets likes. These aren't lies, exactly. They're shadows, carefully lit, carefully angled projections of selected truths. And your brain, evolved over millions of years to assess social standing through direct observation, doesn't know how to process this. You're not comparing yourself to real people anymore. You're comparing yourself to shadows, to the impossible amalgamation of everyone's best moments, filtered through algorithms that prioritize what's visually appealing, emotionally triggering, engagement optimizing. No wonder you close the app feeling inadequate. You're competing with projections that were never meant to represent full human lives. You're measuring your behind the scenes against everyone else's highlight reel, as the saying goes. But it's worse than that. You're measuring your complex, messy reality against shadows specifically designed to make you feel lacking, so you'll keep scrolling, seeking, consuming. The cave doesn't need chains when you keep returning voluntarily. And then there's the erosion of reality itself. Plato's prisoners at least had consensus. They all saw the same shadows. They could point and agree. That's a tree, that's a person, that's a horse. Shared reality, even if diminished. What happens when even that breaks down? We live in an age of deepfakes, videos indistinguishable from reality, showing people saying things they never said, doing things they never did. We live in an age where images are generated by AI, where nothing you see online can be trusted absolutely. The cave becomes total when there's no reliable reference to what's real. And it's not just manipulated media, it's the fact that your cave and my cave might be showing completely different shadows. The algorithm that curates your reality isn't the same as mine. We're not just in different rooms of the same cave, we're in entirely separate caves, built specifically for our psychological profiles, showing us different versions of what's happening in the world. This is how we get radical polarization. This is how people can look at the same event and see entirely different meanings, intentions, villains, heroes. We're not arguing over interpretations of shared reality. We're inhabiting different realities altogether. You think you're having a political debate, you're actually describing shadows from different caves. And you, when was the last time you actively sought out a perspective that challenged yours? Not to mock it or steel yourself against it, but to genuinely understand why someone might see differently. Leave a comment with one source or voice you disagree with but respect. Let's map our caves together.
So who's projecting these shadows? In Plato's cave, it was unclear. Perhaps puppeteers, perhaps priests, perhaps con artists. The allegory doesn't specify. But in our version, we know exactly who's in control. Not a conspiracy, not a shadowy cabal. Something more banal and more total. The logic of engagement itself. The platforms don't care what shadows they show you. They care only that you keep watching. Truth is irrelevant. Importance is irrelevant. Enrichment is irrelevant. All that matters is the metric. Time on site, clicks per session, scroll depth, conversion rates. So the algorithm learns, outrage keeps people engaged longer than nuance. Simplicity spreads faster than complexity. Fear and anger are more reliably viral than hope or careful thought. And gradually, invisibly, the shadows shift. Not because anyone decided to manipulate you, but because the system optimizes for a goal that has nothing to do with your well-being or understanding. You become the product, your attention is the commodity, and the shadows exist to keep you producing it. This is where the Plato's allegory gets contemporary relevance that's almost frightening. The prisoners in his cave were passive, chained, unable to move, forced to watch. But you're a voluntary prisoner. You can leave any time. You choose to return. You unlock your phone, you open the app, you scroll. Why? Because the cave is comfortable. That's the secret Plato understood. Liberation is painful, and most of us would rather remain in familiar darkness than face uncomfortable light. Think about it. What would it mean to really leave your filter bubble? It would mean admitting you've been wrong about things. It would mean encountering perspectives that challenge your moral certainties. It would mean sitting with ambiguity, complexity, contradictions that don't resolve into clean takeaways. It would mean giving up the comforting tribal warmth of your echo chamber, where everyone thinks like you, validates your outrage, confirms your righteousness. It would mean recognizing that the identity you've constructed, partly online, partly through the content you consume, is itself a shadow, a projection, a performance you've come to mistake for your actual self. This is perhaps the deepest way we've become prisoners. We don't just consume shadows, we've become them. You perform a version of yourself online. You curate, edit, filter. You post what will be liked, what will be affirmed, what fits the narrative you're building. And slowly, the performance starts to feel more real than the messy, contradictory, unphotogenic person you are offline. If it's not posted, did it even happen? The joke contains a terrifying truth. We've begun to measure the reality of our experiences by their shadow projections. The vacation isn't fully real until it's a carousel of perfect images. The meal isn't satisfying until it's photographed. The achievement doesn't count until it's announced. We're trapped in the position of both prisoner and puppeteer, watching shadows and casting them simultaneously. And when someone tries to show you the light, when someone points out your bubble, your bias, your cave, you react like the prisoners in Plato's story, not with gratitude, with hostility. You're trying to censor me. You think you're better than everyone else. You've been brainwashed by them. This is the defense mechanism of the cave. Anyone who suggests you're not seeing clearly becomes a threat to the entire structure of meaning you've built. They're not offering liberation, they're attacking your reality. And maybe they are being condescending, maybe they are self-righteous, but maybe, just maybe, they've seen something you haven't. Maybe they've felt the pain of readjustment, the vertigo of realizing how much was shadow, and they're trying, however clumsily, to help. The tragedy isn't just the truth is rejected, it's that the act of offering it makes you suspect, dangerous, someone to be metaphorically killed before you can infect others with doubt. We see this everywhere now. Fact-checkers are accused of bias, scientists are dismissed as elites. Nuanced analysis is seen as weakness or fence-sitting. Anyone who complicates the narrative, who refuses to conform the shadows, becomes an enemy. The cave has become so comfortable, so total, that exit feels like death. So what do we do? Plato believed the philosopher has a duty to return to the cave, to attempt liberation despite the danger. He didn't say it would succeed. He didn't promise the prisoners would listen, but he insisted it must be tried. If you've seen beyond the algorithm, if you've felt the vertigo of recognizing your filter bubble, if you've experienced the pain of readjusting to complexity, what's your responsibility? You can't force anyone out. You can't drag people into uncomfortable light. The prisoners in the cave have to choose to turn around. They have to want to see what's casting the shadows. But you can be honest about your own cave. You can admit what your algorithms hide from you. You can demonstrate that leaving the bubble doesn't mean losing yourself. It means finding a fuller version of reality, even if it's harder to navigate. You can model curiosity over certainty, questions over answers, discomfort over the false peace of never being challenged. This isn't about moral superiority. Here's the paradox. You can't leave the cave completely. Not in the modern world. You need your phone. You need to communicate, to work, to navigate basic existence. The digital infrastructure isn't optional anymore. It's the air we breathe, the water we swim in. So the question isn't, how do I escape? It's, how do I stay conscious while inside? Start small. Notice your impulses. When you reach for your phone, pause and ask, what am I looking for? Distraction? Validation? Connection? What am I avoiding by entering this cave right now? Look at your feed with anthropological distance. What shadows is it showing you today? What emotions is it trying to trigger? What worldview is it reinforcing? Then, and this is the hard part, seek out the shadows it's hiding. If your feed is all one political perspective, actively search for thoughtful voices from the other side. Not to hate read, not to confirm they're crazy, but to genuinely understand how someone might see the world differently. If your feed is all success and beauty, follow people who share their struggles, their uncertainties, their imperfect processes. If your feed is all outrage and crisis, balance it with long-form thinking, with context, with nuance. This isn't censoring yourself. It's the opposite. It's expanding beyond the censorship the algorithm has already imposed. But knowledge isn't enough. You also need practice. Plato's freed prisoner needed time to adjust to the sun. His eyes couldn't handle direct light immediately. He had to start with reflections, with indirect glimpses, building capacity slowly. You need the same gradual exposure.
Take temporary exits from the cave. Not forever, just moments of deliberate disconnection. A walk without your phone, a conversation without checking notifications, an entire morning offline. These aren't retreats from reality, they're returns to it. The unmediated world, the one that exists whether or not you document it, the one that doesn't optimize for engagement. In these moments, notice what happens. The initial anxiety, the reflex to check, to capture, to share. And then, if you stay with it, something else. Presence. The particular quality of light today. The actual face of the person you're talking to, not the image you might post later. The experience of boredom, which is increasingly rare and increasingly necessary for deep thought. The cave isn't just about information, it's about attention itself, and reclaiming your attention, deciding consciously where to direct it rather than letting algorithms decide, is the beginning of freedom.
There's something else Plato understood. The sun, in his allegory, represents not just truth, but the good, the source and principle of everything valuable. What's our equivalent? What's the light beyond our digital caves? Perhaps it's this: direct, unmediated reality, the world as it is, not as it's curated to appear. Other people as they actually are, complex, contradictory, messier than their profiles suggest. Yourself as you actually are, not the shadow self you perform, but the full person with doubts and questions and unresolved contradictions. Ideas as they actually work, requiring sustained attention, nuanced understanding, the patience to sit with ambiguity rather than reducing everything to hot takes. This is harder to access than shadows. It's slower. It doesn't give you the dopamine hit of a like or the tribal satisfaction of shared outrage. It doesn't sort neatly into heroes and villains, into 5-point lists, into content designed for maximum engagement. But it's real, and reality, for all its difficulty, has something shadows can never provide: depth. The possibility of genuine surprise, the experience of encountering something that doesn't just confirm what you already think, but expands what you're capable of thinking. The light might hurt, but at least it's light. So here you are, still reading, still thinking. Maybe you're already aware of your cave. Maybe this is news. Maybe you're resisting, thinking, not me, I'm different, I see clearly. That resistance itself might be worth examining. Plato didn't write his allegory as a story about other people, the ignorant masses who need enlightenment. He wrote it as a story about all of us, about the human condition, about the difficulty of perceiving reality clearly when our very perceptual apparatus can be shaped by those who control what we see. The question isn't whether you're in a cave. You are. We all are. Multiple caves, probably. Algorithmic, ideological, psychological. The question is, do you want to know what's casting the shadows? And here's what's both terrifying and liberating. You might not. And that's okay. Liberation isn't mandatory. The cave isn't evil, it's just limited. And sometimes, maybe often, we choose limitation because the alternative is overwhelming. But at least make it a choice. At least know that you're choosing the comfort of curated shadows over the discomfort of complicated light. At least admit the algorithm knows what you'll click before you do. It's built to, it's optimized for it. And every time you open the app, you're volunteering to see exactly the shadows it thinks will keep you there longest. You can delete the app, or you can just open your eyes a little wider. Notice the cave, question the shadows, seek the light that makes your eyes hurt. Plato thought it was worth it. He thought the pain of truth was better than the comfort of illusion. 2,400 years later, with caves in our pockets and shadows in our hands, the question remains, what do you think?